Hey everyone, welcome to our video podcast that is 100% dedicated to helping couples like you and like us develop disciplines that will grow their marriage. If you think of a plant, and we planted a garden this summer, and we put flowers in the ground, and this morning I was out there watering some of the plants. My wife has a rose garden, and I had to go back there and start pulling the weeds out because the weeds just keep coming in. And I think a garden is an apt metaphor for a marriage. You just can't put it on autopilot. So this program is all about helping couples to not put their marriage on autopilot, but to exercise a variety of practices that will help their marriage to grow and to blossom, and that your marriage and your home will be like a well-watered garden bearing fruit for yourself and for others. That's what we're committed to. And so as we go along, if this is what you're looking for, this is the kind of information that you want, the actionable, practical information, we're going to encourage you to hit that like button or to subscribe to our program so you can constantly get this kind of content in your inbox and for your life. So we're glad that you're here. And the last time that we were together, after we were through sharing with you, my wife said she felt kind of cheated. And so I'm gonna turn to Judith and let her tell you why she thought I cheated her.
I wouldn't necessarily call it cheating, but you asked me why I wanted to marry you,
right?
But you didn't ask me. I didn't get to ask you why you wanted to marry me.
All right, I think that's a fair question. Why did I choose to marry? At that time, it's Judith Thompson. And she likes to say Thompson without the P, so she can differentiate who she is. But no, so as we said to you earlier, we met each other when we were 14 years old, and so we grew together as friends. And when I look back on the reasons why I married you, Judith, it's because I think from the very beginning, I realized, to use a very tired kind of phrase, we were soulmates. I mean, we were really good friends. Judith was one of the few persons that I felt I could really be myself with. I am not, an extrovert. I'm not totally an introvert. I'm somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. So here is a woman who is very outgoing, very friendly, and I felt so comfortable. I felt like she accepted me for who I really am. By the way, she was the only person who would laugh at my corny jokes, and she still does to this day. And I also think she's pretty beautiful. I was kind of surprised that she was even interested in me. I mean, she had all the guys out there who could have chosen her. But then I also married her. And here's the real reason why I proposed to you, Judith, and why I wanted to marry you. It's because I loved you. I love you. And I also wanted us to share our life together because we have so much in common. There's so many ways in which we fit together, and we can share our values together and our life together to bless each other, to bless our children, and for the glory of God. So those are just some of the reasons why I asked you to marry me. And here's something I always tell people, that if I could do it all over again, if I had the power to somehow turn back the clock, and I had to do it all over again, Judith, I would still ask you, would you marry me? Would you marry me?
Thank you so much.
If I asked you today, would you marry me, what would you say?
Definitely.
Music to my ears, guys. Music to my ears. So what we want to do today is to talk about another really practical thing that happens to every couple. In fact, as Judith and I have thought about this, we both identified that over the years, our lives have changed. Who I was at 23, who Judith was at 23 and we got married, we're not really the same people anymore. But along with that, what happens in many relationships is that every relationship is susceptible to what's called marital drift. Marital drift. And there are many, many reasons why this happens. It's not always clear, where a couple finds themselves drifting apart from each other. It's not that they move and live in separate zip codes or they live in different homes, even though that may eventually happen though, where a couple literally separates if they do not take very decisive action to arrest this problem of marital drift. No, the couple begins to drift in very small and very almost unseen ways.
Yes.
And one day they wake up and realize we feel like strangers living in the house together. Now, that force called marital drift happens to everyone, but there are some ways you can recognize it, there are some ways you can stop it, and there are some practices that you can put in place on a daily basis to ensure that this does not happen. So Judith, I'm going to throw the hard question at you then. What do you think are some of the reasons why couples drift apart? These people really loved each other. When they stood at the altar and said, I do, they really meant it. And now 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, they're wondering, why did I marry you? What happens? Why the couple gets to that place?
Well, one of the first things that comes to my mind is that sometimes in a marriage, if they have children, the kids can become first. And that's one of the things that I know, where the kids have become priority and everything is surrounded or focused around the children rather than the couple. And they invest a lot of time with the children and not enough time with each other. And so I would say that that's one of the, it's very subtle though, because you really want to love your kids and you want to invest in your children. But then when if kids don't have a strong home with parents who love each other, then it's going to affect the kids anyway. So it's better for you to invest and put your marriage as number one, as priority, of course, after the Lord, and then the children. You do it together as a team to work together with the children. But every time there's an isolation where the husband feels like he gets no attention, or the wife feels that it's all about the children, I get no attention, then that can be one of the things that can cause it to drift. Another thing is career. And a person can go into a particular career and they start a career and everything is at work, and it's always work all the time, and they're not coming home in a timely manner, being home for dinner, to sit and have a meal together. They're not investing a lot of time with the spouse, and the spouse starts to feel jealous. It's almost like a career can also be like the other woman, and they start despising that job and that career of that person, or it can be the other man. So I think that's another, one of the two. There are others, financial.
Financial pressures.
Financial pressures, yes.
Yeah.
And, there can be lack of purpose and direction for their lives as a couple.
Well, let me just say something about the issue of financial pressure, because that is maybe one of the biggest factors that cause marital drift.
Okay.
Money is a very emotional topic, and in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about money, but you're right. And I just want to add the reason why money becomes a factor that can cause marital drift. It's not that the couple doesn't have money, it's what they do with the money.
That's true.
And often a lot of couples, we all want the best. We want nice things. We want to spend it in such a way that we feel like we're living the life. Mm-hmm. But by doing that, often we end up in significant financial debt. And there are so many families that are drowning in a mountain of debt. And what that does, instead of the couple coming together to work on how do we fix this financial thing, it
right.
pushes them apart. So that is really important, and that's a topic we really want to deal with.
Yes. And then we can have a situation with a lack of intimacy. That's another one. After a while, when couples start, they notice that they're not attending to each other.
Yes.
It's like you talked about the garden and how we're not tending to it. We're not putting in the necessary ingredients to make a marriage really a couple feel close to each other. So they're not spending quality time together.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's no intimacy. And intimacy is a very crucial part that's can literally erode a marriage when there's no intimacy. It's almost like you become like roommates. Yeah. So we can talk some more about that.
Absolutely.
And how that can be detrimental when there's lack of intimacy in a marriage.
I was also thinking, Judith, I think another thing that contributes to this drifting apart is that the couple, after a while, loses a sense of why are we married? Where are we going?
Purpose, yes.
Where are we going?
Definitely.
And so often as the kids get older and the kids become more independent, the couple begins to discover, what do we have in common now? Because what really glued us together was the focus on getting these kids from the potty into diaper, from the diaper into being independent, right?
Yes.
And once the kids get the driver's license and they're on the move and they're doing more things, suddenly the couple begins to go back to the beginning of when they were together without kids, and they're wondering to themselves, so what do we do? Why are we here?
Yes.
And one of the things I remember you and I talked about very early in our marriage, we felt that we would never ever want to put our kids ahead of us, because a day will come when the kids will be gone, which is where we are now.
Yes.
And so what do we have in common? What have we invested over the years to make sure that when our kids are gone, it doesn't mean that we also then leave? And that happens to a lot of couples.
Yes.
So you're right. It's many, many factors that contribute to marital drift. So the question then for our friends who are viewing is, how do we stop that? And it's not that we have the definitive answer, but what would we say to a couple who has some or all of the factors that cause drift? How do we encourage them to pull back together?
Well, awareness is very important.
Awareness.
And then transparency. I think when we know that there's something going on, because we usually know, there's signs. You don't have to say, well, I think something is happening. I remember a situation where I was talking to a couple, and I asked a question. I asked the husband, I said, what percentage would you give to the marriage out of 1 to 10? And then I asked, of course, the wife the same question. It was interesting to see the disparity between the two answers. The husband said, I would give it a 9, and he was very proud and confident. And the wife said, like a 4, 5, or something like that. And another case was almost the wife was saying it's a 3, and the husband was saying it's an 8. So that was kind of what I often hear. And it's interesting to see that the awareness that for one person of this is what's happening, the other person is totally oblivious that they're drifting. And most times, I would say that people are not aware, deeply aware. They know something is wrong, but they don't know what. Yeah. And I think when you can pinpoint that issue, then it would be easier for you to be able to resolve it.
So you're just saying, just be aware. And then what was the second one? You said transparency.
Yes, that when you're transparent with each other, you're saying, honey, something is wrong. Something is going on. And don't dismiss the other person because the other person says something is wrong. We need to check it out. Honey, what do you think is wrong? I noticed that we're just not connecting, or the kids are becoming, everything is around the kids. Or, for example, we're just not going on dates anymore. We're really having some financial issues here that we need to address. Yeah. Whatever the case may be. And it might be expectations, maybe unrealistic or unmet expectations. But we need to talk about it and not just brush it under the rug. And I think the awareness is going to be very important, and being transparent and being honest with each other.
Yeah. And that's really hard for men, because as men, we tend to hold in how we really feel. Women tend to be more expressive, and I'm not trying to create stereotypes here, but I just want to acknowledge that. So it means then, and we're really coming to the end of what we want to talk to you about today, because there's so much more that we can do in this topic, and we'll have other opportunities to pick this topic up. But if you could just hold on to those two thoughts here for a moment. Awareness. Maybe what you could do today, tomorrow, after viewing this short video, is to say to your spouse, how would you rate our marriage? And if it is very high, it could be high because it's really good and you don't have much to work on, or it could be unrealistic. But the point is, if the person says it's a 9, it's a 10, it's an 8, or it's a 1, then you need to go to the next step and say, so why are we rating it that way? What does it mean? What are the signs that our marriage is really strong? What are the signs that our marriage is really weak? Yes. What do we do about that? That's one thing, awareness. And the second thing that we talked about was transparency. And it's the whole idea of just being very, very honest. And it could go something like this. Honey, I need to tell you right now that I am very, very discouraged about our marriage. And if your wife or your husband comes to you and say that, that's the time for you to be all ears and to listen, because they're trying to be transparent. There's a verse in the Bible that says that if we cover our sins, we will not prosper. But if we expose it and bring it into the light, that we're going to be healed. And so the whole idea is you're going to talk about the things that we have a tendency to cover up, just to be very transparent with each other. So we're going to stop here. And again, we want you to know that if this is the kind of stuff that is helping you and encouraging you, go ahead and click that like button and go ahead and subscribe. And we also invite you to go right ahead and share this information with your friends. We want for every family, every marriage to know that there are some practical things they can do to actually take a good marriage, to make it a better marriage, to make it a stronger marriage by some daily practices that we call disciplines to make your marriage stronger. So God bless you, and we'll see you again.